Masechet Gittin, Daf Gimel. Yesterday we saw the Mishnah that if someone brings a get from a different country to Israel, he has to say, Befanai nichtav ubefanai nichtam, it was written and signed in front of me. Why? We saw two reasons. Rabbah says because in Chutz La'aretz they do not know of or do not agree to the requirement that the get be written lishma for this particular woman. And so we have to make sure that it was, and therefore if this witness comes and says it was written in front of me, so either he says or his presence reflects the fact that it was written in front of his presence, presumably for him to go and take to this woman. And so that's why it's required to say that it was written in front of him. We asked yesterday, according to Rabbah, why don't you require two witnesses? Because in general, to ratify a document, to ratify signatures, you need two documents, you need two witnesses. For anything, you need two witnesses. And so we should need two witnesses to testify that it was written, in fact, lishma. And we answered that first of all, it is davar shebe'arva, which generally needs only one. Even though here there's a chazakah that she's prohibited, still the requirement to say anything at all is actually only the Rabbanan. In fact, most of the scribes know that it has to be done lishma. There's just a few that don't, and so the midoraita it doesn't need to say anything. The rabbis are the ones that said, let's give an extra precaution and require the messenger to say this formula. But since it's only rabbinic stringency, we're not going to be overly stringent because we don't want there to be an Agunot. And if there's only one person to send a shaliach, and he alone says it, and then if we say, oh, you require two, and now this get is not going to be valid, and she won't be able to get remarried. So we want to give sufficient evidence that it was done properly, but we don't want to require too much, because then we'll make it more difficult, and then she may end up being an Agunot. All right, so the rabbis are lenient and didn't require two witnesses. One is sufficient. Now we pick up on that and we ask, Hai kulahu chumrahu. Dimas rechat le tere la te baal umar eru pasil le had ate baal umar eru pasil le. You're calling this a leniency for her benefit? Actually, it's a stringency. It can actually work against her, because if you require two witnesses to come and say we saw it was written properly, then the husband would have no possibility to come and contest the document. But if you require only one witness to say it was written properly, then you're leaving open the possibility that the husband can come later, contest the validity of the document, and cause her trouble. So you see, in almost every case, a leniency has a equal and opposite stringency, and vice versa. So why don't we actually be nice to her and take care of the problem immediately, require two witnesses so that it will be foolproof. And the answer is Kevan Damar Mor Bifne Kama Notno La Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Chanina Chad Amar Bifne Shnayim V'Chad Amar Bifne Shelosha Meikara Medak Tayek V'la Ate Le'oro'eh Nafsheh. The answer is because we have a tradition that when the messenger comes and gives it to the woman, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chanina, one said you have to give it in front of two people, the other said in front of three people. So at that initial stage, when the messenger comes and gives it to her, there are in fact two or three people that are there. Because of that, the agent is going to be careful and he's going to clarify the matter fully. If there's any questions, it'll come up at that point. And at that point, since it's being given in front of two people, at least, those two people can say, we were there, we saw it given, we clarified everything. And actually, even with one messenger, that's sufficient to have it foolproof. The husband will not be able to come and question it ever again. And that's why the rabbis were happy and satisfied with only one messenger saying, Befanai nichtab u befanai nichtam. All right, good. So now we clarified that. We're going to go through the same exercise and repeat some of the same arguments for Rava. He said, the reason why the messenger has to say, Befanai nichtab u befanai nichtam, is because since it's coming from a faraway place, the witnesses that signed on it are not around in order to ratify it. If it's written nearby in the same place, then we don't have to worry, because if the husband or someone should contest it, so we'll find the witnesses, or someone that knows the witnesses and recognizes their signature. Because it's coming from far away, so we need the shaliach to be kind of like a notary to say it was signed in front of me. They signed it in front of me, so I can testify that yes, this is really their signatures. They in fact signed it. All right, fine. According to Rava, why don't you require two, just like you require in all cases of ratification of a document, right? Whenever there's a case, any type of shtar, where someone contests the witnesses, you need two people to come and testify, yes, we know this signature. And so here also, you should require two people, send two messengers, both that say, yes, we saw it being signed properly. And the answer is, since this is a matter of isurin, and it's not a capital case, it's not a civil case where someone has to pay money, but rather isurin, like kosher, one person is permitted to be believed in terms of that. Like if a wife says that she counted this many clean days for a nidah, she's believed. You don't need two witnesses. So too for this. Hold on, we ask. The only time we can rely on one witness is, for example, if you have a piece of fat and we're not sure if it's prohibited fat or permitted fat, where in that case, it's 50-50, and there's no prior status quo, there's no presumption of that's forbidden, so then you can believe one witness to say, oh yeah, I know, this is this is permitted fat. But this law of one witness does not apply in a case like this, where there's a presumption of prohibition. The woman surely was married, everybody agrees, everyone admits that she was married before, and so she has a prior status quo of being eshet ish, and therefore to permit her to go and marry somebody else, this is a serious matter of adva, and you need two witnesses when there is a prior to change the status quo. So a new answer. עדים החתומים על השטר נעשו כמי שנחקרה עדותן בבית דין, ורבנן הוא דהסתרוך ואחר משום עיגונה כאילו ברבנן. In fact, in order to ratify a document, you really don't need two witnesses from the letter of the law. As Resh Lakish says, the witnesses that are signed on a document are pre-certified, right? Like you're pre-certified to get a credit card. The witness, that's the point of the witnesses on the document, that you don't need two people to be walking around with the document the whole time. By signing it, they are showing that they agreed to this, and it's like it's already their testimony has already been examined in court, right? So once they're signing it, and from the outset we established that these were good witnesses. So it's like it's pre-processed, and therefore from the letter of the law midoraita, we do not need to ratify. If someone comes and says, "Oh, I don't think that these are correct signatures," we say, "You bring proof that these people weren't there and couldn't have signed it." Without proof against it, we can assume that the testimony, the signatures, are correct. The rabbis, midrabanan, required that you have to bring ratification when it's contested, just to have an extra level of care so that people don't go and forge documents. However, in this case, because we don't want the woman to be left stranded and to be an agunah, the rabbis were more lenient to require just one. So that solves the problem, similar to the way it did last time. And so this explains why one shaliach saying, "B'fanai nichtav, b'fanai nichtam," I saw that they signed it. That's sufficient, because really from the letter of law you don't need any, so we want to be lenient and not require too much. And now we ask, you think you're being lenient and helping the wife? Actually, it's a stringency, and this may come to backfire, because if you require two witnesses, two messengers to say we were both there, then the husband has no possibility of coming to contest it. But if you have only one there, then maybe the husband will come contest it later and cause problems. And this might be, after she already found someone that she wants to marry, or already got married, or already had children, and it'll cause just bigger problems later. So the answer is כיוון דאמר מור בפני כמה נותנו לה, רבי יוחנן ורבי חנינא אחד אמר בפני שניים ואחד אמר בפני שלושה, מעיקרא מדק דייק ולעטה לאורו אין נפשה. Because we already learned that when the messenger gives it to the woman, it's going to be in front of 2 or 3 people. Therefore, those 2 or 3 people, they are witnesses. They will make sure that everything was done correctly. The messenger will make sure that he clarifies all of the whole situation, explain exactly where he was, who signed it, and if there are any questions, they would come up at that point. And once they don't come up at that point and everything's clarified, so those 2 or 3 people that saw it being delivered, they can testify. We were there, and this is a valid get. So we don't have to worry at all about the husband coming and contesting it later. And so she is safe and sound, and that's why the rabbis were satisfied to be lenient and require only one messenger to say the formula. Good. How come Rava did not agree with the opinion of Rabbah and say it's because we don't know if it was done lishma out there in Chutz La'aretz? Because the language that the messenger says is just, it was written and signed in front of me. It doesn't say it was written for her sake, or it was signed for her sake. It doesn't say anything about lishma. So ha'ikad achaser min hasefer. If that's what you're worried about, then the messenger should make sure to say, I saw that it was written for her sake. It doesn't say that. ורבה, בדינו דלתנה הכי, אלא די מפשט לדיבורה, עתה למגזייה. Rabba says, you're right. Really, ideally, it would be good if the messenger would say, בפני נכתב לשמה. However, if the sages would require that, now you're already increasing and making this a long statement to memorize. Sometimes the messenger, he may be a fast guy, but he's not necessarily the world's greatest memorizer. And so he may come to shorten it. If you ask him to remember too much, then he's going to only remember part of it and he's going to leave it out. And if you require it and he doesn't say the word lishma, and now you say it's no good, so now you're causing more problems. Again, by trying to be machmir, you're going to end up being mekel. And so therefore, it's enough to say, b'fanai nichtav, b'fanai nichtam, and then we can assume that, since he was there, and they're writing it in front of him, that they're writing it for him to take to this woman, and they can ask him if they really need to clarify. So therefore, you're right. It would have been best to say lishma, but it's not practical to require that. Now, now we ask, hold on, even this formula, b'fanai nichtav, b'fanai nichtam, maybe he's going to shorten even that. And the answer is, chada mitilat gaiz, chada mitarte la gaiz. No, it's more likely that a person will shorten if the 1 out of 3 statements, b'fanai nichtav, ufanai nichtav, lishma. And so that at 1 out of 3, he's like, I remember 2 of them. I can't remember everything that they told me to say. But if there's only 2 statements, wait, there was something else. So he'll remember 2, and he's not going to cut off 1. He's not going to cut off half of it without realizing. So so we're not worried that he's going to cut off the 1 out of 2. Now we turn tables around. Rabbah, how come you don't agree with Rava's opinion that we need to ratify the signatures? אמר לך, אם כן נתנה בפני נכתב בתולה, בפני נכתב למה לשמה מינה בעינה נשמע. He says, because also of the formula, if you needed to ratify the signatures, and the messenger could have just said, it was signed in front of me. Why does he have to say it was written in front of me? If the whole thing is to ratify the signatures, so that's all. So since he's saying befanai nichtav, it was written in front of me, it means that he has to testify about something about the writing, and in fact the writing of the get, the whole paragraph, all the lines have to be written for her sake. So Rabbah says that's a proof that we're concerned about the writing, lishma, not about the signatures. Rava, bedinu delitne hachi. Rava, how are you going to answer that? Rava says, you're right. Really, it would be sufficient to just say befanai nechtam. But here's the problem. people may get confused with other types of ratification of documents, and think that also there you can use one witness. In other words, if they see that, oh look, this get nashim is being ratified with one witness, just saying b'fanai nechtam, they'll say, oh, I guess one witness is enough. And then tomorrow, when they have some other a loan document or a deed of sale, they're also going to ratify it with one witness saying b'fanai nichtam, and they won't know to make a distinction. Therefore, we change the formula and we make this messenger say b'fanai nichtab u'fanai nichtam, so everybody knows, oh, there's something different about that. Oh, it's a get. Oh, I see. Get is an exception. That's why there's only one shaliach. He's not going to come to apply that to other cases, which need two. Good. V'Rabba midame hatam yadinan hacha b'fanai. Rabba will respond to that and say, these are actually totally different, and people will not come to get confused. It's fine, according to you, to just say b'fanai nechtam, because look at this three differences at least between a get and other types of contracts. Number one, in general contracts, to ratify it, the two witnesses have to come and say, we know that these are the signatures. We recognize these signatures. Whereas for the shaliach of the get, he just says, bifanai, it was signed in front of me. And he's not saying that I know them, I know the signatures. So already you see that the formula is different in any case. So no one's going to come to confuse them. Second difference, hatam isha la mehemna, hacha isha mehemna, regarding general documents, women are not credible, valid witnesses. You need two men to come and say these are valid signatures. You need two men to ratify it. Whereas in this case of a get, the messenger could be a woman, and she says, "Oh, I was b'fanai nichtam, b'fanai nichtam." So that's the second difference. And third, hatam ba'al davar la meheman, hacha ba'al davar meheman. In general cases of contracts, the interested party is not believed. Right, the seller, the buyer, cannot himself say, I validate this document. Whereas here, if the wife herself, the divorcee, comes and says, yes, this was signed in front of me, then that's sufficient. So you see that there are three differences, and therefore nobody will get confused if you just say b'fanai nechtam. And therefore, the fact that it says b'fanai nichtav also proves, according to Rabbah, that there's something about the writing, that the writing has to be lishma, and that's why that's a better reason than Rava. Rava, how are you going to answer that? He says, in the case of get, you also could ratify it in the normal way. And you could bring two witnesses, and they could say, yes, we know the signature. This is the signature. So since, regarding a get, you can ratify it in the normal way, and if there happens to be that there's two witnesses and they know the signatures, they can do that. And regarding a get, where you can do it the normal way with two, or you could have one messenger say b'fanai nechtam only. If he says b'fanai nechtam only, people will say, oh, just like a get, there are two ways to ratify it, with two witnesses, or with one witness that says it was written in front of me. So too, they will come to think that for other types of documents, also there are two ways, two witnesses that say we know, or one witness that says it was signed in front of me. And that's why we require b'fanai nichtab u'b'fanai nichtam to have a different formula, even though actually there's nothing significant about the way it was written that we need the shaliach to testify about. Okay, back to the other side. Ul Rabba damar lefisha en biki'in lishma man haytana deba'e kitiba lishma u'ba'e chatima lishma. Now a question to Rabba. According to you, who say that the reason why he has to say b'fanai nichtav u'fanai nichtam is because out there, outside of Israel, people are not aware, are not careful with the law of writing it for her sake. Now, who is the Tana, right, Rabbaz Amorah? So who is he following? What Tana is he following that requires both the writing of the get, the whole wording of the entire document has to be for her sake, and the signature also has to be for her sake? Because after all, he's saying both. That was a key element of Rabbah's proof for why he disagrees with Rava. That says b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtam. He has to see both the writing and the signing. That means both of them have to be for her sake. Who says that? Rabbi Meir, he does require the signing be for her sake, but he does not require that the writing be for her sake. Ditnan en kotvim b'mechubad lakarka, kitabo al mechubad lakarka tilasho chatamo untano la kasher. This is a stam mishnah, but we're attributing it to Rabbi Meir, because stam mishnah is Rabbi Meir, and it says that you may not write a get on something that's still attached to the ground. You take some leaf or something that's still attached to the ground, is no good. However, if you did write the get, the language of the get, while it was attached to the ground, and then you cut it off, and then you signed it after it was cut off, that's valid. That's a kosher get. What you see is that the writing is not important, right? Because the writing, while it's attached, is not considered valid. But the writing is not important, and so therefore it doesn't matter if the writing is written la lishma. You could be written for a different person with the same name, and that would be okay as long as the signature is okay. So it can't be Rabbi Meir because he only requires chatima lishma. Rabbi Elazar kitiba ba'eh chatima la ba'eh. Rabbi Elazar is the other way around. He requires that it be written lishma, but does not require that it be signed lishma. V'chitema leolam Rabbi Elazar hi v'chila ba'eh Rabbi Elazar chatima lishma b'deoraita b'drabanan ba'eh. And maybe you'll say, okay, Rabbi Elazar, he's true. He doesn't require the signing to be lishma on the deoraita. Maybe b'drabanan he requires it, and that's why the messenger is going to say b'fanai nechtam to cover even the drabanan requirement. We can prove that Rabbi Elazar does not even require, not even midrabanan, because of the following Mishnah, which mentions 3 Gittin that are invalid midrabanan, and Rabbi Elazar does not disagree regarding their signing. Ditnan shelosha Gittin pesulin v'im niset havalad kasher. Mishnah says that there are 3 types of Gittin that are invalid invalid from a drabanan level, but b'di'avad, if you use the get, and she gets and she goes and has a child with another man, the child is not a mamzer. Why would it not be a mamzer? It means that on the doraita level, it was a good get, and therefore when she gets remarried, on the doraita level, the child is not a mamzer. However, on the drabanan level, we don't want this type of get to happen, and therefore we invalidate it only midrabanan. So what are the 3 types? Kata bichtav yado ven alav edim. If a husband wrote, he knows how to write, and he writes the get himself with his own handwriting, even if there's no witnesses on it. That's one of them that are valid midoraita, but not midrabanan. Yesh alav ediv en bo zaman, or has witnesses signed on it, but they missed on they didn't write the date. Yesh bo zaman ben bo ela ayd echad, or has a date but has only one witness. Harei elu shelosha gitin pesulin v'mniset havalad kasher. These are pasul midrabanan, but they are valid b'di'avad on a deoraita level. Now, Rabbi Elazar disagrees and says, "Afa pisha en alav aidim, ela shenetano la bifnei aidim kasher v'gova menechasim mishubadim shen aidim chotmin ala get ela mipnei tikun haolam." Rabbi Elazar says, even if there's no edim signed on it, but it's given in front of edim, so they don't have to sign on it. But rather they are present and see the husband give it to her, and they can testify that they gave it to her, then that is still valid, even if he didn't sign it himself. He didn't write it himself. And not only that, it's good enough that she can use the get to collect from mortgaged properties. If the husband had property and he sold it, and now she wants to come and collect it to pay for her ketubah, so she needs a valid document to do that. This get that has 2 witnesses that didn't sign it but did see it transfer, she can even use that to go and collect that land from the properties that he had already sold but that were mortgaged to pay her ketubah. Why? Because the signing of the witnesses on the get is only there for the betterment of society. It helps her out, because if you rely on the 2 witnesses that saw the transfer, well, that's okay as long as those 2 witnesses are around. But let's say many years later, they're gone, they die, can't be found, and then she's not going to have any proof. Whereas if they're signed in the document, then even if they die, those two witnesses, the document is still valid. It can be ratified from anyone that recognizes the signature. We can compare the signatures, and so this will help in the long term. And so it's good for society, because we don't want people to have to come afterwards and have to deal with any problems. So that's why we require it. But that requirement is only to help out for the betterment of society, to help her out, help any future children she will have out, but is not actually required in order for the get to be effective. We conclude from here that according to the Elazar, you don't even need witnesses altogether to sign on the document. So you certainly don't need witnesses to be lishma, not on the Doraita level, not even on the Drabanan level. And so we can't be following Rabbi Elazar. So we're back to square one. Who is Rabbah following in requiring that lishma has to be both written and signed lishma? Ella Rabbi Meir he. So let's go back to Rabbi Meir. Maybe you'll say, according to Rabbi Meir, it is true that the writing does not have to be lishma on the Doraita level. Maybe on the Drabanan level it is required, and that's why the messenger has to say befanai nichtav for the Drabanan. Beha Amar Rav Nachman Omer Haya Rabbi Meir Afilu Meso Be'ashpa V'chatamo untano la kasher V'chi tema ana medoraita kamatninan la Ihachi Omer Haya Rabbi Meir Devar Torah mi ba'ele. But that can't be that he even requires the Drabanan that it be written lishma, because look what Rav Nachman said. In the name of Rabbi Meir used to say this often, even if you found a get in the garbage that was already written for some other couple, and now you found it and you said, oh look, this has the same names and I'm going to use it again, I'm going to use it for myself, and you sign it and he gives it to his wife, that's valid. And here it obviously was not written lishma, it was found in the garbage written for someone else. And if you say that no, he was only talking here that the midoraita it's valid but not midrabanan, if so, he should have said, Rabbi Meir used to say on the Torah level that this would be good. Right? In other words, you have to clarify that. You can't just say kasher if you mean only Deoraita, not Rabbanan. So since he doesn't say that, it means kasher totally and doesn't require the writing to be lishma, not even midrabanan. So we're still left without an answer. Ela le'olam Rabbi Elazar. We're going to go back to Rabbi Elazar. V'chila ba'e Rabbi Elazar chatima hecha deleka edim kilal. And it's true what you proved, that Rabbi Elazar does not require it to be signed. That's fine. If there's no signature at all, then the signature does not have to be lishma, because there is no signature. So that's true. But hechadika edim ba'e. But if you do have a signature on the get, then it has to be done correctly and has to be done lishma. Right? There's cases like that where, listen, you don't have to do it at all, but if you're going to do it, you have to do it right. Right? You don't have to get me flowers, but if you're going to get me flowers, they better be nice ones. I don't want all withered flowers. Right? Withered flowers is worse than no flowers. So too, a bad signature, one that's not lishma, is actually invalidates. And even though if you had no signature, that would be fine. Damar Rabbi Abba, Modeh Rabbi Elazar b'mezuyaf mitocho shu pasol. Rabbi Abba says, according to Rabbi Elazar, he agrees that if the falsification is inherent in it, meaning if it was signed by disqualified witnesses, someone comes and says this witness was invalid to be a witness, then the get is going to be no good. Even though if there were no witnesses, it would be fine, but still this is a negative. And therefore, we have an answer. Rabbah can follow Rabbi Elazar in his requirement that befanai nichtav befanai nichtam, it has to be written and signed. If it's signed, it has to be signed correctly and lishma. So that is an answer, but we have yet one more answer. Rav Asher Amar Hamane Rabbi Yehuda hi ditnan Rabbi Yehuda posel ad shetei kitibato v'chatimato betalush. Rabbah could actually be following Rabbi Yehuda, who says in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says a get is no good unless both the writing and the signing are when it's detached from the ground. In other words, both the writing and the signing since it has to be done when it's detached, along with all the other laws, including writing it lishma. The writing of it and the signing of it have to be when it's in the state of being detached, which means it also has to be done lishma. Both are important. So this looks like the obvious answer. Rabbi Yehuda says both the chat ketiva and the chatima. Now the question is, why don't you give this answer in the first place? You're struggling between the Meir and the Elazar. He says one, the other one says the other. We have to work so hard. Why didn't you tell us this answer right up front? The Yehuda says you need both. And the answer is Mehadirinan Arabi Meir, the stam etnitin be Meir. Mehadirinan Arabi Elazar the Kaimalan el Chatakevate be Gittin. Yeah, we knew the Yehuda, but we didn't want to jump to that because we really would prefer an answer according to the be Meir, since Stam Mishnah is the be Meir, so he has greater authority, and we if we can, we would like to find a way that Rabba can follow the be Meir. Or since Rabbi Elazar, it says there's a rule that halacha follows Rabbi Elazar in regarding Gittin, and therefore we would prefer if Rabbah could have Rabbi Elazar to follow, right? Who is an authority in this case. So even though we knew Rabbi Yehuda all the time, we left it on the side, right? We didn't bring it forward to explore if we could find an answer that would be more, according to a Tanah, that's more authoritative in this area. And we did in fact find that it could fit with Rabbi Elazar here, and then when we finished that, we brought Rabbi Yehuda in as well. This is a methodologically very, very significant statement because a lot of times the Talmud Bavli will go on a long thing exploring what's the possibility, and at the end give a more obvious answer. And you wonder, it had that obvious answer the whole time. Why'd you bother exploring all those theoretical possibilities? So you can say maybe it just enjoys a theoretical debate, which is true as well, but a lot of times there is in fact a good halachic reason that the obvious answer is not the best authoritative or legal conclusion that we want to get to, and therefore we'll explore those other possibilities first in order to propose an answer that will better accord with the legal conclusion that we are seeking, and only then bring the more obvious answer, and that way we fulfill Yagdil Torah v'Yadir. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'Amen.